Serious Redditors who have been kidnapped, what's your story? Here's a more light-hearted answer to this thread. I was camping with my family when I was 5 and playing on the beach unsupervised, but the beach was across a short dirt road from our campsite where my parents sat enjoying the view, so they could probably see the top of my headish. And as kids do, I made a friend with another girl around my age and her sister. We played for a while until their mom said they were leaving to explore the island about 500 m down the beach from where we were. She asked me if I wanted to come, and of course I did. So we went there. We spent the afternoon on the island exploring the small old buildings and beaches. Their mom brought sunscreen and snacks and drinks. And a couple hours later she returned me to where I was on the beach, and I crossed the road back to my campsite. My parents weren't there anymore, so I waited a while, and when they showed up they came with police. Very small town, family friends. They both gave me the biggest hug, and didn't give me much freedom the rest of the summer, and now we joke about it from time to time. I never saw the girls or the mom again. Somewhere around 1990, I was about 11 and was walking with a friend when a guy grabbed me and threw me the back seat of his car. His daughter was in the front seat, and they were looking for someone who had been hassling the girl at our local park, and she recognized me from the park and thought I knew the guy. I kind of did, but only by first name, and didn't know where he lived. But then I got a great idea. I said I knew where he lived and had the guy drive to where I lived. As soon as the car stopped, I jumped out. All the neighbors were out and blocked him in so he couldn't leave before the cops showed up. He was arrested, but between being young at the time and this being nearly 30 years ago, I don't remember what happened to him. So I was like 3, my sister was 4, and my brother was an infant. My biological father kidnapped us from Loa and took us to New Mexico, where he left us with our grandmother, his mom, for 8 months. While we were living with my grandmother, I guess my mom would call looking for him and looking for us, and grandma would tell my mom she didn't know where he was and she didn't know where we were. She even cut me and my sister's hair off to make us look like little boys so no one would recognize us. I guess one day my biological father came to his mom's and kidnapped us again from her this time, where she called my mom and told her what was going on. Mom got on a bus and came to get us. I don't remember much because I was so little, but I remember this part. He had taken us to a homeless shelter where the police found us. They arrested him and kept us safe until our mom got there and took us back home on a bus. I didn't find out how long we had actually been gone until I was in college, like 18 years old, talking with my mom about it. From my memory the whole thing seems like just a span of days, not months. I don't know whatever happened with my biological father's arrest. I don't know what they charged him with. I don't know if my grandmother ever even got in trouble. I never talked to him and he died when I was 16. Of course I don't associate with that side of the family at all either. My father took me on Halloween when I was 5. We ended up 3 states over. He had major warrants out and went on the run. He was a violent drunk and a tweaker. We hopped counters most of my childhood avoiding his newest warrants. He tried to kill me several times while drunk by strangling me, and I basically grew up in honky-tonk bars, and him drunk driving with me in the car, almost driving us off a cliff in between the bar and our house. He hurt me really bad one day and school got involved. I was given to his mother, who promptly moved him in where it continued. I had to run away back to my original state to be with my mom. But by then I was super messed up by it and had to live in children's shelter and a group home. Just an attempt. I live in a quiet neighborhood up the streets from a nice, private university. Most of my neighbors have lived in the area for at least 5 to 10 years. My landlord has owned my house for 34 years at this point. After finishing a bottle of wine and deciding we were in the mood for a second one, I volunteered to walk to the corner liquor store, less than 3,000 feet away, and grab one. Didn't even bother locking the front door or bringing my phone since I've done it a million times. As I'm walking in the dark along some bushes, a guy pulls up next to me and asks if I need a ride. I say no thanks. He speeds off and leaves. A few seconds later, I hear tires squealing and see the car coming back from the opposite direction. The tires squeal again, and I hear the engine rev. One broke out running at a full pace, with this car following me the whole time. By the time I arrived at the liquor store, the girl inside sees the panic on my face and locks the front door and calls the cops. The guy was just sitting outside staring in. The cops arrived about 10 minutes later, in time for him to drive off. Since he hadn't done anything illegal at that point, I doubt they were able to ticket him. After he buzzed off, I waited a few minutes in time to see a neighbor heading to the convenience store and had him walk me home. I'm not sure what would have happened to me, but I always drive whenever I head over now. I wasn't kidnapped, but I was extremely close. When I was younger, about 8 or 9, I went over to my friend's house. He wasn't home, but his cute older sister was. Being young and dumb, I kept knocking on the door after she answered already and said he wasn't there. She had come to the door like 3 times before she just completely ignored me. Well, a few minutes later a black sedan comes rolling down the street and stops on the other side of the road from the house I was outside. There was a little girl riding one of those tricycle things when the man gets out of his car and starts walking towards her and grabs her handlebars and starts wheeling her towards his car. I begin yelling at him to stop it and start beating on the door again to get the sister's attention. Well, she wasn't answering it, and the guy started heading over towards me. So I start screaming, crying and pounding on the door for her to open it up. All the meanwhile, this guy is still walking toward me. Well, she finally answered the door, as the guy was at the foot of the stairs, and she asks him what the hell he is doing. I tell her what he's doing and she asks if that's his kid, to which he says no, and he starts running toward his car. He hopped in, books it out of there, cops get called and I get interviewed by then to give a description of the guy. They never found him, but I always wondered what would have happened if she never answered the door for me. The uncle of a Mexican friend of mine was kidnapped. The uncle was retired and used to be a real estate agent. He had been fairly successful, so he had a nice house and drove a Hummer. One day he disappeared and the wife got a phone call asking for a 10 million peso ransom, which was close to 1 million USD at the time. Now, they weren't actually that rich. He had gotten a good deal on the house because of his job, and a slightly used Hummer is really cheap there thanks to the narcos. So, the wife went and talked to cops since she couldn't afford the ransom. A day later she got a phone call from the kidnappers that they knew she had talked to the cops. The uncle was never seen again. That wasn't the only kidnapping or murder story I heard. Those things are really common there. Don't believe the people in this forum that say it is a safe place and the media is exaggerating things. I've told this story only once, please forgive me for the foggy details. When I was 6, my mom and I were living in a hotel. She would always have people over. I never really got familiar with any of them, but my mom thought it would be a good idea to let one of her friends babysit me while she went and did whatever it is my mom does. This friend, who is female, kept asking me if I wanted to go to her house and play with her 2 kids. I remember feeling excited at the prospect of playing with other kids, because I never went to school, and normal people didn't let their kids live in hotels. This woman took me to her house, no kids. She said they would be here soon. Time kept passing and they never showed. I kept asking to call my mom, but she wouldn't let me. She just kept saying her kids would be there soon. This where I lose my memory. I remember being there all night, and the police banging on this woman's doors in the morning. I have no idea how they found me, or what my mom was going through. But I was only gone one night. The closest I ever came to being potentially kidnapped, in the mid-1970s, it was a socially accepted thing to do to drop your kids off at the shopping mall and let them just walk around and kill time. If you were lucky, your parents would give you some money to see a movie or get a bite. So one day, we were probably 13, a friend and I were dropped off at the mall. CYA at 5 o'clock. We were wandering around Sears looking at jeans that we couldn't afford, and this guy, probably in his mid-40s, came up to us and started chatting with us. It wasn't long before he was talking about girly magazines did we want to see. He had some in his car. My friend's dad had every girly magazine in the world that we'd sneak a peek at, and we declined. We agreed he was creepy and we found a mall security guard, but the guy was long gone. Looking back, he probably wanted to molest us or coerce us into giving him a beach. I just wonder if he was successful, if he had a string of victims, and if he ever was caught. Excuse me in advance since I'm typing from mobile. I was almost kidnapped as a child. I got off the bus and was walking home. I was probably less than 100 feet away from the stop. Immediately a white cargo van pulls up and the door swings open. A nice woman starts asking me where I lived and to come in, and she will drop me off. Keep in mind it's winter and I live in Canada, so it's freezing. I grew up with stranger danger, so my alarm bells are ringing. There was no way I was going in, and at this point the woman was practically leaning out of the car. I peered over her and saw a big fucking dude crouching behind her. I noped the fuck out of there real quick, and the van closed its doors and sped off. My friend and former co-worker was kidnapped. We worked at a grocery store with a huge parking lot. This wasn't your typical store in a minimal. It was all by itself with a raised parking lot not visible from the street, so if you worked nights like my co-worker, did, it was pretty desolate out there. Plus, we all had to park at the far end of the parking lot, not very well lit. His lunch was about midnight, and he walked out to his car. As soon as he opened the door, two guys jumped out from behind it, hit him in the head, and made him get in the back. Then they went to the freeway and started driving east. He was conscious, just really shaken up, and he asked them where they were going. They said Los Angeles, which of course meant they were doing the wrong way. They were headed into the desert. He told them this and they turned around. Once they got to LA, which would have been a couple hours, they pulled up to an ATM and made him get out and withdraw a bunch of cash, which was $300 because of the withdrawal limit. He gave it to them and they drove around, bought some drugs, and hired a prostitute, whom they took turns with in the back seat right next to him. Then they kicked him out and he called the police and made it home, a bit bruised and shaken up, but all right. His car was later found totaled and abandoned. When I was 12, I went into a school bathroom after classes had ended. I was washing my face and this middle-aged dude slammed open the stall door, shoved me into a corner, and locked the door. He raped me and then left. I didn't tell anyone. A few weeks later, after school, he pulled up next to me in this pickup truck with a gun, and he told me to call my parents and say I was sleeping over at a friend's house. I did, and they bought it. He took me into his truck, blindfolded me, shoved me in the back, and drove me to his house, where he brought me to the basement. He stripped my clothes off and tied me down to this old mattress in the corner. He raped and tortured me the whole night. In the morning he dropped me off at my house. He had been stalking me for several months, and this happened a few times more after that. I never told anyone because I was too scared. He said he would find me and kill me if I ever told anyone. I believe someone once attempted to kidnap me when I was about 20 years old. I was at Target shopping before returning to college, and had parked out in the middle of the lot away from other cars to avoid scratching my own in a busy lot or something. It was the afternoon in summer, so still broad daylight. As I was returning, I noticed that a van was parked right next to my car, very close to the driver's side. So that set off some alarm bells. As I got a little closer, still a very safe distance, probably 10+ car widths away, it got creepier. A middle-aged man was sitting in the driver's seat, wearing sunglasses I think, watching me. And the van was a straight-up kidnapping machine, a literal old camper van, with all the windows and doors covered up from the inside. It didn't make any sense for him to park there. A. Why park right next to me when there are literally dozens of other spots, and B. Why park in the hot sun instead of the shade if you'll be sitting in the car? So, I went to ask for a security guard, a policeman, to escort me to my car, which one did. And he, the policeman, was very nice about it all. Additional creepiness. As the police car approached, the man in the camper van put the sun visor down and started reading a magazine to hide his face. I put my stuff in the car, jumped in, couldn't even open the driver door all the way, and booked it out of there. The cop car sat by the van until I was out of sight. Gives me the creeps just thinking about it. Thankfully my family raised me to be very paranoid. Edit, spelling and grammar. Please excuse, I'm typing this out on mobile. I wasn't exactly kidnapped. My parents had a disgusting custody battle over me, and accused each other of more and more drastic things until the state had enough, and I was picked up from kindergarten and placed in a group home. After a few weeks, I was placed in a foster home, where I stayed for 9 months, while my selfish parents went through God knows what in court until they decided I could live with my maternal aunt, where I stayed an additional year. Was ultimately placed with my mother, with my father having visitation rights. None of it was worth it. I went through hell because my parents were selfish and motivated by greed. Although not officially kidnapped, I was incredibly close. It all started one day at my apartment complex. I was little and loved climbing the tree near the post office. However, one day, a woman drives by and insists that I get in her car. I say no, and she insists. I get scared and run into the tree. However, that wasn't the last of her. Our apartment complex has a central office, and they give out free cookies daily. A few days later, I was going down to get my daily cookie when the secretary said hello. I was friends with all of the office staff, so this wasn't surprising. However, she was speaking to someone. It was that woman. It was terrifying. I grabbed my cookie, and instead of running home, I sat down. I wasn't about to have her know where I lived. She eventually left. I hadn't told anyone yet. A few more days pass. I am playing in a bushy field, enjoying myself. Her car pulls up. She comes out and is walking towards the back doors. In this time, I run behind some bushes. She opens the door, revealing a dog. She walked it around, searching in bushes for me. I threw a rock at a wall and distracted them. I ran away after that. Never saw her again. My sister and I were kidnapped as babies in the mid-60s. Our dad went to work. Our grandmother came to our house in the city, packed us up lock, stock and barrel, and brought us to the beach. I didn't see our dad until his mother's wake funeral in 1992. We were always told that he hated us, never gave money for support, that side of the family didn't want to have anything to do with us. He tried to kill us by putting tape over our mouths. Well, at the wake funeral, talking with my father, I found out that he did send support, although he was never allowed to see us. My grandmother ripped the checks up and sent them back. And that his mother had held onto dresses to give us when she saw us again. She never did. Pissed off and hurt doesn't even come close to how I felt learning all this shite. And it was good that my grandmother was already dead. And my sister kidnapped her own kids, because her husband at the time decided to torture her during the divorce by saying that he was going to kill himself and let the kids find him. She freaked out and took the kids, wound up in a loony bin, and lost custody of the kids. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos like this one.